Welcome to the sixth and final episode of the best 25 players of the last 25 years. NFL Daily has been doing it, and I'm going to have to say it. We're doing it well, and we're going to wrap with one of the best in the game, my friend, Bill Barnwell. And you got a nice slot in the schedule, Bill. You're doing the top 3 players of the last 25 years.
Was that an LL Cool J reference in the intro?
It was not planned, and it was, but that is, I think, perfect. And another guy who's been doing it, for 25 years plus.
As someone who was born in Queens, I feel like that that represents me quite well.
I love it. We got 3 more players to talk about. Our listeners could probably guess at this point who they are. Before we even get into it, Bill, would you have anyone different in your top 3? Would you have anyone different?
A pretty clear top 3, and certainly it feels like, it's really easy to pick quarterbacks, and yet I think we've kind of been spoiled because we've had 3 quarterbacks who have been so transcendent, especially, 2 of the 3 guys we're going to mention being so incredibly successful that we almost sort of take it for granted that that's just sort of something you're going to have in the NFL. And history tells us that is not the case. And I wouldn't be surprised if 10, 15 years from now, maybe when NFL Daily is doing 50 for 50, that we see there is not that sort of truly transcendent, constantly successful quarterback that we saw at least 2 of these 3 guys be over the past 25 years.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I would be 71 years old at that point. So cross our fingers. Let's go to number 3.
Number 3, Peyton Manning.
Manning facing pressure. Manning looking, takes a hit as he fires downfield. He has a wide open receiver, Reggie Wayne, out of a 10-5 touchdown. They were coming at Peyton Manning. He felt the pressure. He took a hit and was able to find a wide open Reggie Wayne. That's a 53-yard pass play.
When I look back on my NFL career, I'll know without a doubt that I gave everything I had to help my teams walk away with a win. There were other players who were more talented, but there was no one who could out-prepare me.
Most of the stuff that comes out of Peyton's mouth is just he's playing chess with you, and a lot of people play checkers with him.
Disregard the audible now. Disregard the audible. Providence, Soprano, Reno, dipper right, Wisconsin going.
Throws homer and goes. Got Julius Thomas there. Thomas with the touchdown, and there's the record. Peyton Manning's 51st touchdown pass of the year. Move over Tom Brady. That chair belongs to Peyton Manning.
I fought a good fight. I finished my football race. And after 18 years, it's time. God bless all of you, and God bless football.
No one talks, no one plays quite like Peyton Manning, and no one could say God bless football and actually make me feel emotional. Like, he straddles the perfect line between total devotion and absolute love for the sport, veering on cheesiness almost, but it doesn't matter because he means it so much, and you could see it like in everything that he did.
Yeah, I mean, a player who did not need to come back from his neck injury, did not need to have that second run with the Broncos, could have very easily said, hey, I am good. I've won a Super Bowl. I have every record in the Colts, pretty much every record. I don't know about exactly every record, but certainly plenty of records for the Colts. Accomplished everything I want to accomplish. Could have left the game on. Instead, came back and had an incredible second run with the Broncos that was depicted mostly there. I really think Peyton is so hard to judge because he came up in the era of Brady. And we're going to see that with guys from this era. We're going to talk about Patrick Mahomes later on in the show, and guys like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, and judging them in context with Patrick Mahomes and his success. You were there, Greg. I was there. Other people were not there. I feel like people forget how much of just strictly how often those Brady Manning discussions occurred early on in Manning's career. And then Manning, of course, sort of puts them aside by winning 2 championships, including one where he has an incredible comeback and derails Brady along the way.
Right. It's crazy because you say that he lived in the Brady era. And I think how I experienced it in some ways for a while was it was more the Manning era. And Peyton Manning was obviously better, faster, and won more individual awards than Tom Brady did. He still did. 7 All-Pros, first team. And that was in 11 years, including the year that he was out with the neck injury. So that's just a crazy, unprecedented run of being the best quarterback in the game over a decade plus. 5 MVPs, 3 more second teams, and a few more like top 5 MVP votes. So he kind of was the individual guy. And as late as the Seahawks Super Bowl that Peyton Manning played in, and I think that was a big turning point for his career and for the Brady Manning debate, which, I think ultimately Brady kind of put an end to.
Yeah.
But at that point, Bill, I want to direct you to the front of NFL.com. That very day, I remember there was a column by one of the best to do it, Judy Batista, who was opining like if Manning wins this game, it kind of cements him as the GOAT, because at that point in their careers, they're already late 30s. Like Tom Brady and Manning are both late 30s, and you're just not even thinking what else Brady could possibly do at that point. And that if he had won that one, because at that point he had just beaten Brady, and Brady hadn't won a title in 10 years, it kind of felt like all the individual awards plus another title against a great defense like Seattle would put Manning over the top. So it is a really interesting time and way to think about it, because that is deep into their careers that it was still very much up for grabs.
Yeah, and for whatever issues Manning had in the postseason earlier in his career, we did see some great games from him as time went on. The comeback win against the Patriots, that they went to win their first Super Bowl against the Bears. I think one of the great lost games or forgotten games in NFL history in 2009, playing that Jets defense with Rex Ryan and Darrelle Revis, that peak defense, AFC Championship game. He goes for, I think, 377 and 3 touchdowns on what might be one of the 2 or 3 best defenses of the past 25 years, and propels in the Super Bowl, where they did lose to the Saints. He obviously had some games that weren't as impressive as well, but I think that story, that idea that he wasn't able to do it in the postseason, he was able to eventually put to the side. And then, of course, the second Super Bowl run, he was, a shell of himself, and still managed to do just enough and protect the football on way to winning that second title. And so he becomes difficult to sort of measure, because I felt like, he was more of a moving target. With Brady, because there was so much success early on in his career, he became defined really quickly. So what Tom Brady does is win. Peyton was more, it was more inconsistent. There was more of a, yes, this guy is great, but yes, the story we told about him in 2002 is different than it is in 2007. Different in 2011, different in 2015. He evolved more, I think, in some ways, even though Brady might have evolved more on the field as a player.
It's such a fascinating comparison, because all of that is totally true. And yet, when you think about who was the most consistent, I would say, player at any position over the course of what I think is the most valuable way to evaluate players, which is like a 16-game regular season sample, I think it has to be Peyton Manning. And I know wins are not a quarterback stat, but he was like a walking 12-win season. The whole like football outsiders idea that offense is more consistent is it's partly on Peyton Manning. You know what I mean? Like he had I think it was a run. I wrote it down. Yeah. 10 years out of 11, they won 12 games, which is just outrageous. And I think it's okay in this discussion, and I don't want to just talk about what's different, because we're crowning him the third best player of the last 25 years. He is one of the greats of the greats. But I think it is okay to point out that the numbers did go down in the playoffs overall, and that it was a big enough sample size for him, for Mahomes, spoiler, for Brady, and that they've played so much in the playoffs that the decline in Manning's numbers in the playoffs are significant enough to matter. But what also matters is his influence, Bill, on the game. And I just think him orchestrating at the line of scrimmage, and the way that their offense was simple but complex in the same way, was just not just one of a kind, but a throwback to an era that he revered, Johnny Unitas, and the quarterback being kind of the orchestrator, and really was a little different than the Bill Walsh era, where the quarterback was running the offense that was called, or the Brett Favre type of play, where it's more about improvisational. And this was Peyton Manning, I think, having an influence on the game at large, including Tom Brady. I think he was actually an influence on Tom Brady, and then certainly Aaron Rodgers and Mahomes. And and Joe Burrow, that like the type of quarterbacks that we see now.
Yeah, Rodgers especially. That feels like the most obvious one to me, because when we talked about Rodgers last year with some of the criticisms of how he wanted more of an antiquated offense. He wanted more static stuff at the line of scrimmage. He wanted to pick people apart, not with using motion, not with, turning his back and play action. Well, they had a little bit of that. He wanted static defenses and wanted to pick defenses apart. That's what Peyton Manning wanted too. Like, he wanted answers for his protection. He wanted to know, okay, what are our answers when we're going to get blitz from certain sides? But he did really want to get to the line of scrimmage and then figure things out from there. And it's hard to overstate maybe how simplistic the Colts offense was. Like, the sheer number of plays they ran. They might have like 8, 10 pass concepts in their playbook. They might have, a few runs. They're mostly a zone team in an era where a lot of teams were primarily zone teams. But it was how those plays meshed together with Tom Moore's influence, how Peyton called them at the line, how he knew, how he read them so quickly, how they had stuff at the line they could check to and change to. If it wasn't a great defensive look, he got them in good looks so often at the line of scrimmage that then he was so often facing really simplistic or really basic coverages, which he then exploited, and he had great players take advantage of those as well. Now, I actually thought about this. I want to know what you think about it. With Peyton, I think about this idea of, okay, how would a Peyton Manning offense look today? How would he play today? Not that it's been that long since he retired, but it's still been about a decade, and defenses have evolved a bit. Would he do as well in an era where defenses are much better at disguising their intentions? There's much more post-snap movement. You have more sim pressures, more stuff that you're trying to confuse and disguise your looks and take advantage of weaknesses in protection. Maybe he struggles with that. Maybe he benefits from playing in an era where, when you hit those big plays, maybe you're hitting more big plays. And this is a guy who, I think one of the criticisms or one of the things that happened in that offense was there were moments where he laid out guys over the middle of the field. You think about Austin Colley's career. Dallas Clark comes to mind as well. Guys who were getting hit a lot over the middle of the field. That's not happening nowadays. You're not taking those same hits over the middle of the field. Maybe he'd have more advantages on those seam routes, on throws over the middle of the field, on those digs. I think he would have been a different kind of quarterback, but I still think he would have been great.
Yes, I thought about that question too, because you just don't see a quarterback. You don't see guys coming up from college with the lack of athleticism that Manning or Brady had. It just doesn't happen in terms of the type of speed. But I still think he would be as successful. I just don't think football will ever evolve to a point where a guy who can win before the snap and after the snap and throw as accurately and prepare with his receivers in such a way will ever be totally out of style. Maybe naturally he would somehow be more athletic, because like those quarterbacks just don't happen. He would just maybe be working on his body more. I don't even know what would be different, but you said how the defenses are just so much more complicated now and all the different things, and that's absolutely true. And in a way, I think that would make him greater, because the quarterback that can understand and beat all of that and almost get outside of a like McVay tree type of understanding of 1 to 2 to 3, I think their intellect would be even more of an advantage. So I still think he would just be Peyton Manning. And when you think about great players, Bill, you think about who makes the players around them better. And I think that's on game day, and I think that's in their practice regime too. And you just hear from every Colts player and the attention to detail of like how on top of things they had to get to be with Peyton Manning. Clyde Christensen, his longtime coach, said he hated showing up for a meeting with Peyton Manning and just feeling unprepared. Like, coaches going against Manning, they don't talk about going against Jim Caldwell or Tom Moore. Rex Ryan and Belichick talk about it gave them nightmares to have to go against Manning. He was essentially the coach. But think of all the players that he made better. Like Jeff Saturday winning 6-7 All-Pros, or Tariq Glenn. Like, he made their offensive linemen better with the way that he got rid of the ball. But like, you can go through every guy who caught the ball from him, Reggie Wayne and Marvin Harrison, but also like a Demaryius Thomas and Eric Decker. Like, Eric Decker was at his best.
You showed a Julius Thomas clip in the video in the introduction.
Right. Like, that to me is kind of the ultimate quarterback and football great ability, is to make guys better. So I'm glad you brought up the Broncos in that second act. Let's actually listen to a play with a guy just talked about, the late, great Demaryius Thomas.
3rd and long, 3, going deep. Oh, and he's got Thomas! Goodbye! Touchdown! 63 yards, Peyton Manning. It's the all-time highest scoring offense in the history of pro football. And Manning authors a beauty, a 63-yarder to Demaryius Thomas.
He has so many records, Bill. I sort of forget that one, highest scoring offense in history.
Yeah.
And that's a great example of like when you think of his quote unquote shortcomings, like his mobility or whatever, and like arm strength compared to the best of the best. Like that is a great clip to show how great he was with the subtle movements in the pocket and throwing when he needed to at the last second. And that with his timing and his anticipation, maybe the best anticipator in NFL history.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to move a ton if you know where you're going with the football. You might only have to take a step or two in the right direction to make those throws. You don't need to scramble, create a structure if you're so good within structure that nobody can stop you. And you brought up Belichick and Rex Ryan and that preparation. I think what made it so tough to play Peyton Manning and play the Colts is just that it wasn't like they had new stuff. It wasn't like, the offense changed from year to year. I remember Chris Brown, my colleague at Grantland at the time, wrote a great piece about how the Broncos basically just installed the Colts offense after he struggled early in that run in Denver. He had a game against the Falcons where I think he threw a pick 6 or 2 early on, and they were struggling, and they just got back to the same concepts the Colts ran, and they were just fine and had one of the best seasons in NFL history the following year on offense. That, to me, I think made him so tough to stop because you really knew what was coming. It was really never a disguise thing. It was just, you were not able to stop these concepts because they were so good at running them. They were so efficient. They were quietly good running the ball because he'd always get them in good spots to run the football. And then, he was getting rid of the ball so quickly that it was really hard to take him down consistently. So he really negated the pass rush in a lot of ways. He was, the players he was working with, especially in Indy and Denver, he had some players that, he developed relationships with. But in Indy, I mean, he worked with Marvin Harrison for so long, Reggie Wayne for so long, Dallas Clark for so long.
Brandon Stokely. In both spots. Yeah, he was great in both spots.
You had that core of guys that I felt like, they just had such strong relationships that he knew they were going to make the right adjustments to their routes every single time.
Yeah, I just think, hearing that clip to start it too, just like no one loved the game more. And when I think of influence too, I do think of the way he carried himself. It would drive our friend Chris Wesseling crazy. He thought Peyton Manning ushered in this entire new era of the quarterback as boring spokesperson. I always thought he was like a little hard on Peyton. I just think that's who he was this kind of folksy guy. But he also knew. He also knew from his dad, too, what the NFL was like, and I think he was always very careful not to take, like, a wrong step. And then we saw with the commercials and with SNL and now with the Manning cast that he just is, like, football. If I had to think of, like, one person that's football, it's probably Peyton Manning.
Yeah, I mean, he feels like the football dad. Like, he is he is universally coaching all of us to learn a little more about football. And that's I think, his legacy is going to be this guy who, I think really represented football in this generation even more than the people we're going to talk about because, as good as they were on the field, it feels like, we're going to be hearing Peyton talk about football for another 30 years at this point. I think he's going to be the closest thing that this generation has to a John Madden, maybe in terms of, how frequently and how well he talks about the game. And so that may turn out to be totally false. I might just be, being a good company man here and suggesting that you should turn on the Manning cast. But realistically, I just think, he's become such a ubiquitous figure after his career in a way that even Tom Brady, who's doing commentary for Fox every week now, is not.
And don't get it twisted. Like, he was cold as a player. He won 5 freaking MVPs. Like, that 35-14 comeback in 4 minutes against the Bucs, that stands out to me. They were a walking comeback. They were one of the best comeback teams because they were such a explosive, quick offense compared to what their competition was. So just one of the best to do it. Let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and reveal number 2. on NFL Daily's Best 25 Players of the last 25 years, you probably figured out our next guy, a guy who, on the Around the NFL podcast, it only took about one season as a starter before we started comparing him to Jordan.
Number 2, Patrick Mahomes.
Go out there and take that every single snap, everything you got for the guy beside you, and we're going to find a way to get a win.
First and goal. Mahomes flings it. It's there! Hardman! Jackpot! Kansas City!
And the game-winning drive of Mahomes' career, he's been waiting for. He's won Super Bowls, but he's never had it in an overtime. He is the best. He is the standard. Your Michael Jordan wins it again.
And if winning football games makes you a villain, we're going to keep going out there and doing it.
Chiefs need some Mahomes magic. Launches down the middle. Hill, open, caught. And they get it. Kansas City, the big play.
What Tom has done is historic, but if there was a player who could do it, it would be Patrick.
But I've been blessed to be on a lot of great football teams with a lot of great coaches and a great organization, and I just try to maximize every moment because you never know when it's going to be your last one. I know I'm a long way from Tom, so I'll try to do whatever I can to get close to that.
Patrick Mahomes coming in at number 2, and that clip, Bill, has a moment in Patrick Mahomes' first Super Bowl where it's 3rd and 15. They're down 20-10, and at that point in the game, he's thrown 2 picks without a touchdown. And it's a reminder with Manning, with Brady, with Rodgers and Breeze, who we've talked about, the margins are so slim. Like nothing was promised. But Patrick Mahomes has so many of those moments where it is 3rd and 15 and he makes a throw just few others in NFL history could make.
Greg, I remember that game very well because I picked the Niners to win that game. And I
Same.
felt so smart up to that exact moment. And then the ball dropped. And I was just, oh no, I'm going to have to spend the next whatever minutes of this game hoping Patrick Mahomes doesn't do exactly what Patrick Mahomes does. And I swore in that moment I would never pick against the Chiefs again in the Super Bowl. Just a game where he was not good for the vast majority of that game. And then lights out. I think he hit Sammy Watkins for a touchdown pass later on in that game. I'm interested in what you think, hearing what Tony Romo said, because Romo described that drive against the Niners as like a signature drive for Patrick Mahomes. And I would certainly say that's fair. I think that throw, I remember Peter King found the name. Was it Wasp, the name of that play?
Yes.
That 3rd and 15 Wasp throw, maybe one of his most famous throws, that scramble for a touchdown against the Tennessee Titans in the AFC Championship game earlier that year, maybe one of his most famous runs. But it's interesting that I don't know that we have like a signature Mahomes game in some ways.
I thought that was a little bit of a stretch because he was like, he finally did it in overtime. He finally got the game-winning drive. And I guess that's true. But I think of the drive against the Eagles. You got to get points to win the Super Bowl. And he is not 100%. And he does what he's done so many times in his career, which is get a big-time run in the spot that you actually need it. While we're talking about it, let's look at another one of those earlier in that run.
2nd and 9, Kansas City in the red zone at the Texan 15-yard line. Mahomes on the far hash in the pocket, stepping up and trying to squeeze through, stays on his feet. 10, 5, Mahomes is into the end zone. Touchdown, Kansas City on that bad ankle, stepping through the pocket, running all the way to the sweet nectar of the end zone.
It's just so reminiscent of so many moments, like whenever you think Mahomes is down a little bit. I said it, I remember early, even in his first season, and we'll kind of back up and talk about like his journey. But even in his first season, he always ran just fast enough to kill you. Like every first down run he had felt like it was an absolute killer, and that shouldn't get lost in the total alchemy of like what has made him so great.
Yeah, I think his instinct for when to run, how much space he has on the sideline, how much space he has to pick up a first down is just so impeccable. You certainly see a lot of guys who are faster, a lot of guys who are more athletic, and who can run for first downs and do so, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. But I just think Mahomes' ability to sort of figure out, okay, I have exactly enough space to get 10 yards if I run on the sideline at this exact moment. And then that decisiveness to go is, I think, a really sort of unique and special skill for him. I actually think I want to go back even further, Greg, to what was going on with him before the draft, because obviously he was taken after Mitch Trubisky of the Chicago Bears, and then Deshaun Watson, who was drafted by the Texans. But this was a player who, it's not like the Peyton Manning situation where, yes, Bill Walsh famously, debated whether Ryan Leaf was better than Peyton Manning before the Colts took him with the first overall pick. But with Mahomes, when you read the stuff that was written about him at the time, this was not a guy who had a first-round grade in a lot of places. There were a lot of teams who, at least before the draft, were saying to people publicly, this is a day 2 pick. This is even a day 3 pick in some places. There was not that sort of overwhelming, oh my God, this is a generational quarterback prospect. And I think that speaks to how talented he is, obviously landing in the right spot help with the Chiefs playmakers and Andy Reid, but his ability to grow and evolve and adapt, where even in that first year where he mostly sat on the bench before playing the final week of the year, he really evolved as a quarterback. And the guy who showed up that first season in 2018, where he really played from week 1 onward, looked different in a lot of ways from the guy we saw at Texas Tech.
I'm glad you brought that up. And that first start, I wrote an entire huge off-season column about it, because if listeners remember,
the Broncos game.
Yeah, it was against the Broncos. It was week 17, and the Chiefs started Alex Smith in the playoffs, but they wanted to give Mahomes one start, and they actually had their offensive coordinator and their play caller start prepping for the playoffs, while Andy Reid and the quarterback's coach at the time, Mike Kafka, who was going to be the quarterback's coach, prepped Mahomes for that season finale. We actually had him on the Around the NFL podcast, Andy Reid, just a few months later.
And they played their starters now. Denver did.
Yeah.
They're starting defense. And I went into that game feeling like we could score anytime. And once we got in there, I felt the same thing. He gave you that confidence. And he made some plays that you saw him do, these no-look throws that he doesn't practice, so we kind of go, it's practice. He starts doing those in the game. I'm going, whoa, okay, that's something special. So
He had a throw to Demarcus Robinson in that game that was just absolutely crazy. His first completion as a pro was a 35-yard frozen rope. I think it was to the opposite hash. And I love that quote from Reid, who just said, we started feeling like we could score at any moment. And I think the confidence was there, and Alex Smith deserves a lot of credit, because Mahomes and Reid have gone out of their way to just say over and over how much he helped Mahomes in that year. So he ends up coming in as a first-time starter the next year. And that's the thing what is unique about Mahomes compared to Manning or Brady or really anyone, and it's why he's number 2. And we can go in the comparison between him and Manning, because he obviously doesn't have the same amount of first-team All-Pros or MVPs. But what he did, Bill, was be the best quarterback in the league from the minute he actually started playing. His first 3 starts, he had 13 touchdowns, no interception, and was averaging over 300 yards. That first playoff run, he has those crazy comebacks where he had 24 points in the fourth quarter against Bill Belichick's defense. And the only reason, they didn't win a Super Bowl potentially that year is they lost the coin toss there to Tom Brady. So he was epic even in that playoff run. And that's what's unique, I think, about him compared to a Peyton Manning who took till year 6 to win that playoff game, compared to Tom Brady who took till about year 5 or 6 as a pro to really become a plus starter, even though he was winning titles. Mahomes came in and he was just the man from minute 1.
Man. Yes. I mean, it was fully formed really from that first start. I actually watched it against the Chargers before we hopped on, and, just seeing stuff that they were running. They run a bunch of RPOs, which you would expect. They ran the triple for a game with Mahomes, which, Alex Smith is a underrated athlete, but I don't know that they were running the triple all that much with Alex Smith at quarterback there. He was improvising. He was making stuff happen. And a lot of it was deeper stuff. And having watched Mahomes throughout his career now and paying such close attention, I think what's fascinating to me is how he has evolved as a quarterback. Because I think, yes, Peyton Manning did evolve, in some ways as he moved on, but he was really I think, so good and so consistent in running the offense that was very consistent over the course of his time in Indianapolis. Tom Brady did evolve. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But over the course of 5 or 6 years, really, Patrick Mahomes has gone from being the guy who torments teams deep to having to be a guy who throws underneath the vast majority of the time. He's 35th in air yards per attempt over the last 3 years. Only Daniel Jones has fewer air yards per throw. And he's thrived doing that because he's grown patient. He is the guy who, yes, he can still throw deep. He can still make those throws. He still has the arm strength to do it. It's not like he's not physically capable of doing that. But whether it's losing Tyreek Hill, whether it's the defenses being absolutely terrified of him burning them deep, of not having maybe the best offensive line or the best tackles, giving him the time to make those throws in spots, they've been incredibly consistent at picking up third downs at historical outlier rates over the last few years. And that's Mahomes. It's not, Travis Kelce plays a big role, but it's not Travis Kelce. It's not the run game. It's Mahomes and his ability to create a structure, his ability to read defenses, and his ability to take what they're giving him, which, even for someone like Josh Allen, who I think is a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback, he struggles with at times. Patrick Mahomes has been able to do that and do that so quickly early on in his career. And I think that's it only just proves again how fast of a developer he is and how quickly he grows as a player.
Right. I think if there's an underrated part of his game, I don't know if anything's underrated at this point, but it has to be just his decision making. He's just become such an elite decision maker as a young player, and I don't think that gets talked about first. Now, that said, we're taping this at a very unique time in his career, and it was why I struggled with him 2 or 3. My initial instinct was 2, and then you look at the numbers, and 5 MVPs for Manning's, and this exercise, Bill, was supposed to just be about greatness, who I actually just think was the best player. It wasn't about counting stats totally. It wasn't about just racking up numbers. It was the highest, the high excellence. And we're taping this after 2 years where he hasn't been at his best. I think what's been unique about Peyton Manning, Patrick Mahomes, and yes, I know I'm saying that after he wins a Super Bowl and gets to another Super Bowl, so it's all relative. But I think what was unique about him was, I think after 1 year as a starter, he was the best player I'd ever seen come into the league. After 2 years as a starter, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, I was like, that's the best 3 years to start his career, best 4 years. Now, the last 2, if for some reason he stayed at or around that level statistically moving forward, it would be a very different career. I don't think he's played his very best over the 16-game regular season in the last 2 regular seasons. Now, the playoffs are a different story. Obviously, he struggled in the Super Bowl last year, but unlike Manning and Brady and almost anyone else to play the game in history, his numbers have gone up significantly in the playoffs. As good as they are in the regular season, his rate stats are even crazier, and they're great in the regular season too. We might as well go over them before I throw it back to you here. He is number 1 in passing yards per game in NFL history. He is number 1 in adjusted net yards per attempt in NFL history, and number 2 in adjusted yards per attempt in NFL history. Number 1 in success rate. So he is number 1 in a million great categories, and he's got the 2 MVPs, got the 3 Super Bowl MVPs. He's got 1 second team MVP, All-Pro as well. So it's not like the numbers aren't great, Bill, but it is weird because Manning and Brady, their best parts of their career actually started right about now for Mahomes. The best part of Manning's career really started around 27, 28. I would say the best part of Brady's career really started around 30 and then really cranked up around 32, 33. So Mahomes hasn't even gotten there yet. And if we listen back to this in 10 years, I tend to think that this 2-year slight lull is only part of the bigger picture. And he's going to have many more Manning, Brady, Mahomes just bonker seasons moving forward.
Yeah. Those guys didn't always have all pros at every position around them, but I just think to 23 when his receivers had the worst drop rate of the last decade. And I think about the drop against the Lions that cost them the game in week 1 with Kadarius Toney. And then last year, they had a turnstile at left tackle all season, something that I think the great teams have always had, kind of a locked in left tackle, a guy who they can trust pretty much every year they're successful. And the Chiefs have kind of just cycled guys through and managed to win anyway. I wouldn't be shocked if over the next 5 or 10 years, next 5 years, when they have a settled left tackle situation, when they have maybe a better set of receivers. We see more of the Mahomes numbers we've seen in years past. I think, we're also smarter. Like, we also have the ability now in 2025 to watch all 22. We didn't have that for really the vast majority of Peyton Manning and Tom Brady's career. The discourse is smarter. We have more access to data and information that we just didn't have early in those guys' career. And I think all of that really underlies and tells us how good and how consistent Patrick Mahomes is in ways that even the other great quarterbacks in this league are not right now.
Yeah, that is totally fair. And I could see he's an interesting psychology case because yes, Brady had all the team success quickly, but he really didn't become who he was as an individual player, I would say, until at least 05, 06. And then whereas Mahomes has experienced it all. He's had a Hall of Fame career that, in his first 4 or 5 years. So the motivation of how to keep getting better. And I think he's going to want to get back to some of the fun Mahomes plays that we saw early. Let's just watch one of them just for the hell of it.
4th and 9. They're chasing after him. Mahomes in trouble, flings it across his body. And it's caught by Hill. Hill has it. He came back for it, and he's out of bounds at the 12. An amazing play by the Chiefs.
All the way across the field while your body weight is backwards falling out.
That is just outrageous. That's a 2018 game against the Ravens.
And that's not like the only time he's done that or made that sort of throw, Greg. I think back to that Lions game. They actually lost week 1 of 2023, where it ended in like a 3rd and 22 and a 4th and 22 situation. And more than anybody else in football, more than Tom Brady, more than Peyton Manning, more than anybody else, if it's a 4th and 20 plus, the only person on the planet where I'm actually scared of them hitting it is Patrick Mahomes. And he got someone open. I think he got Kadarius Toney open and the ball went off his fingertips, or might have been Sky Moore. I get my 2023 bad Chiefs receivers confused in my head. But even the Bengals game last year where he had a 3rd and forever and a 4th and forever, they hit Kelsey for a touchdown and it got called back because was that the Kadarius Toney? No, that was Nick Kadarius Toney offside. But you get the idea. In those 3rd, 4th, and forever situations, It feels almost like a 50-50 shot, and that's not the case for anyone else in football.
Yes, so I don't really think he's having Brady's career backwards. I think he's going to have the individual success along with the team success moving forward. But it is fun to have a guy. He's really the first guy that I've felt. J.J. Watt is probably the closest other one where as it's happening, as it's starting, you're aware of just witnessing greatness. And 17-4 in the postseason. We saw that clip against the Ravens. He's personally ruined a potential Bills dynasty, beating them 4 times in the playoffs, which is just outrageous this decade. One great team alone, he's beaten 4 times. Everyone trying to get past Patrick Mahomes. Like a lot of teams in the AFC, we're trying to get past our number 1 player. Let's just get to him.
Number 1, Tom Brady.
To the end zone.
Brady's back! That's your quarterback! Boy, when you thought you'd seen it all, my God!
Fires it to the right, down the right sideline, and caught at the 2015 10-5 touchdown, Patriots. Tom Brady to Randy Moss, and they each have set NFL records on the go-ahead touchdown. For Tom Brady, touchdown pass number 50, an NFL record.
You have to have a certain obsession about winning and understanding that there's no in-between. There's winning a Super Bowl, and then there's failure. I haven't seen many do it the way Tom does.
Got locked in now, laser focus. Sideline. What a throw, Amendola on the reception. One of the best of the game for Tom Brady. Toss to White. He's in! Patriots win the Super Bowl! The greatest comeback in Super Bowl history, led by the greatest quarterback.
I apologize to our listeners and especially Bill Barnwell for having to watch all of that, Bill. But you got to cackle while the Giants took Brady out a couple of times. Those obviously were the great moments of his career, and didn't even include the Bucs spiking the football at the end of his career, where he came in second in an MVP vote and won another Super Bowl. Ultimately, it just felt, and I did debate between these three. Was it Mahomes or Manning? And then I thought about Mahomes or Brady, because I know all the accomplishments obviously go to Brady, but in terms of pure greatness, I thought hard about Mahomes and just what we've seen. But ultimately, if we're talking about the highs being just the absolute highest, and then the longevity and accomplishments is sort of the tiebreaker, it's not like Tom Brady's highs weren't exceptionally high. And so in the end, he is my number one. Are you happy with my top three order?
I think so. The thing about Brady, and obviously, I mean, Tom Brady. Like, I don't think you need me to tell you Tom Brady is good. But what I would say really stands out to me is just how ubiquitous Brady came in terms of what you saw off the field and what you saw on the field. I know Patrick Mahomes, or, we were talking, I think, in the video clip about some Jordan comparisons. To me, Brady's the pretty clear Jordan, successor in terms of just the sheer volume of winning early in his career, just the standard being set, the expectation that he was always going to pull things out, that he was never out of a game. The Falcons game didn't happen until much later in his career, but we saw comebacks, we saw great moments, we saw, just poise that was preternatural early on in his career. And then I would say, even maybe more so, just the evolution of the on-field product of the National Football League. Yes, the Colts threw the ball a ton. Yes, the early Andy Reid Eagles threw the ball a ton. But really, that 2007 Patriots team is what transformed the NFL. I mean, when you see the offenses Brady was running early in his career, yes, it's technically still Erhard Perkins. It's still, maybe some of the underlying concepts, but really moving to the spread, incorporating some tempo stuff from the Chip Kelly college teams before Chip got to the NFL. I think seeing an evolution of teams leaning into the pass, leaning into spreading the ball around, leaning into, that being a way to consistently win at the highest level, as opposed to kind of being, maybe more of a gimmick. Maybe we saw like the Falcons run the run and shoot earlier on in the 90s, and that didn't stick for very long. We didn't see teams adopt that. The Patriots were so good, and Tom Brady was so good running that offense, that it became kind of a core concept of what teams do. You could not put it aside and ignore it. And now the modern version of the NFL, there's stuff that wasn't in those offenses, but the modern NFL looks more like the 2007 Patriots when offenses were at their best in a lot of ways than I think anybody could have anticipated heading into that 2007 season.
And hell, like the 2010, 2011 teams too, with like the two tight ends and playing fast. And it's really interesting with Brady because, okay, his accomplishments, he's first team all decade in the 2000s for the Hall of Fame and Pro Football Reference, but he's also first team all decade in the 2010s for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which is outrageous. And then, oh, by the way, in the 2020s, as I mentioned, he won the Super Bowl in his first year with the Bucs, and then actually had a better year overall his second year, and almost won the MVP and had that big fourth quarter comeback that the Rams stopped to help win their Super Bowl. So he's got all the numbers and stuff, even if he doesn't have the amount of seasons being an All-Pro, only three, along with his MVPs, and so that's less than Manning. But it's crazy to think, I think so many of his best seasons, Bill, are actually when they didn't win. I always thought that was weird as a Patriots fan. Like, he was great in 2005. That was the first year, actually, I felt as a Patriots fan that not only is this guy great, but that, he can and should be the best quarterback in the league. Even after 3 Super Bowls, you didn't quite feel like that. He was coming on by the end of 2004, but he was awesome in 2005. And then I think the best Patriots offenses were 2010 and 2011. Their defenses just stunk. And him dragging some of the other teams, like the 2013, 2015 team, which also had their issues, whether it was running or defense, to the doorstep. And he went that 10 long years between Super Bowls. And you think about, like, he was playing his very best then, and yet then he still tacks on the 2014 season, which I think is, to me, like the most complete Patriots team that they ever had, and then you have the comeback, and then you have them kind of dotting the I at the very end with the comeback against Mahomes. There's just so many different seasons like that 2022 one with the Bucs, where it was like it wasn't all about team success. It was about him sort of setting the floor so freaking high that statistically you just were gonna break through eventually, and that's why like they went 10 years without it, but eventually they were gonna win some more of those close games because your boy Eli Manning, wasn't going to get back to the playoffs.
Yeah, the Brady stopper. Yeah, really early in Brady's career, someone who lived in Boston at the time, who was, part of whatever the football internet was early in those days.
We were thriving, Bill. We were thriving.
We were
in the mid-aughts. We were there.
Even the pre-mid-aughts, even the early aughts, Greg. I feel like, Brady was talked about maybe in the same way Brock Purdy is now. Like it was okay, he's a game manager, he's going to be smart, but no, he's not a transcendent quarterback in terms of his ability. No, he's not the guy who's going to terrify opposing defensive coordinators at night. And there was a touchdown pass in overtime against the Dolphins where that was the one. I think it was like an 80+ yard touchdown to, I want to say, Troy Brown.
Yes.
That it was like, oh, he can do that. He has that in his locker. And you saw that over and over again. Brady going from being a guy who was just, oh, he's going to just, come up with a late drive or two, to, oh, no, he's going to dominate you for 4 quarters, to, oh, he's going to rack up crazy numbers, to, oh, he's the focal point of this offense and everything is built through him and around him. That wasn't the case early on. And that really, again, showed his growth, his development, his ability to go from being a guy who didn't have elite arm strength to being a guy who could make literally any throw and terrify opposing teams in the process. And I bring up Troy Brown, and Troy Brown was a good football player, but Greg, he had a couple of truly transcendent players. He had Rob Gronkowski, who was maybe one of the best tight ends in NFL history when he was on the field. He had Randy Moss that year, but just the sheer volume of guys who were not exactly superstars elsewhere. I mean, Wes Welker was not even a regular starter for one of the worst teams in NFL history, that Dolphins team where he got traded to the Patriots, and that turned things around. Guys like Chris Hogan, Josh Gordon, Brandon LaFell, those guys all have more than 1,000 receiving yards on throws from Tom Brady. And, Bill Belichick would have his misses at wide receiver throughout time. They signed some free agents who didn't work out. They had some draft picks who didn't work out. But Brady, really more than Manning, because Manning just had so many talented players, and even Mahomes, who's had Kelsey for his entire career. I mean, Brady made different versions of that offense work. Like you mentioned, the 12 personnel grouping with Gronk and Aaron Hernandez that transformed the offense. They made the spread work. He made it work with David Givens and Troy Brown early in his career, and he was hitting Jermaine Wiggins for plays in the Super Bowl. It really was such a really fascinating offense and changed in so many ways. And the guy who ended up being most closely associated with him down the run was Julian Edelman, who was a 7th round pick. I mean, he made so many guys' careers by being such a incredibly accurate and incredibly anticipatory passer.
Yeah, the 2006 AFC Championship, which was ultimately the best moment, I think, of Peyton Manning's career, because he led that comeback, was so close to being Brady's best job, I would say, dragging a team that shouldn't be there further, because his top 2 receivers that year were Rashae Caldwell and Doug Gabriel, I think, who was hurt by the time they got to the championship game. So it was Jabbar Gaffney.
It's really becoming to remember some guys.
Yes.
Into the show.
I love it. I absolutely do. Well, I think what made him great, though, more than anything, ultimately was his pocket movement. And I think that's just growing up a Patriots fan ultimately and watching Brady is why I lean towards that being like the number one trait, that if you have it, if you can naturally buy a little extra time with small movement inside the pocket while keeping your eyes downfield and like going through your reads, like that is, I believe, the number one trait like a quarterback can have, that and accuracy. And to me, that is the number one thing he was the best at of all time. Like I sort of started to take it for granted of just watching him versus other quarterbacks, of just like what a crazy feel he just sort of naturally had of where the pass rushers were to buy himself that extra half a second. I think he had that in a way that even Manning and Rodgers and Mahomes didn't. I really think that was the thing that kind of made him Brady more than anything else.
I think it's defense rating, and it's kind of crazy that you could have multiple things that Tom Brady might be the best at all time at different elements of being a quarterback. His ability to kind of read leverages of defensive players and take advantage of them. And again, I think with Mahomes, we talked about him taking the easy stuff. Like, Tom Brady was the best quarterback in NFL history at taking what defenses gave you. And, being able to get the ball into the places where there were weak spots in defenses, making that decision quickly, knowing what that was going to be based on, the pre-snap leverage and pre-snap movement, and being able to manipulate that at the line of scrimmage, I think was really hard. And that Patriots offense was not easy, especially as time wore on and they added more and more to it. And you're going to take stuff out, but usually you're going to keep more in than you take out as you're expanding an offensive scheme and an offensive playbook over so many years with so many of the same people. And, there's a lot of option routes in there. There's a lot of stuff that, made receivers' lives hell. I think we saw a Kimbrel Tompkins clip, I want to say, at some point.
Yeah, that was his game winner against the Saints. I thought that was like just one of the best passes of his career. That was a fun game winner. Chad Ochocinco could never pick it up. I'll always blame the 2011 championship on the Patriots not changing their strategy of just leaving Ochocinco on an island, one side of the field, getting totally locked up, not like thinking that he was going to win. But it was partly because, some guys couldn't pick it up, and he had such a high bar of what you needed to do. Speaking of which, you mentioned Edelman as the best wide receiver with Brady, and I wouldn't disagree. But he did have one other guy who followed him to Tampa.
Brady play action, looking third option, end zone, caught Gronkowski again with the touchdown.
Yeah, that run with Tampa ultimately. We'll end with this. It just sort of spiked the football on all these conversations. It almost made it less fun because I think it's easier to forget now, like how freaking old he was when he got to Tampa. He also ruined the Belichick-Brady debate. Really, not that it was a debate. I always thought that was stupid. Like, football is about it's a team sport, and it's the combination.
Produce content, Greg.
Right, it's the combination of them that made them great. But even me as a Belichickian, like, I always thought it was closer to 50-50 than I should have in terms of how important Belichick was. And then you just go back to the reality of, I think, any sport, that of course it's more about the player. And you say about how the offense had transformed all over the years. It's like, yeah, that's Tom Brady ultimately being by far the most important part of it. And for him to go at age 43 and put up those 3 seasons in a row as Bucs quarterback at like an extremely high level, like I said, a second in MVP the second season after winning the Super Bowl the first, it's just like it kind of ended all the arguments, and it was just the ultimate Tom Brady seasons. I actually think kind of were in Tampa.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of warped our brains as well. Like, I talked about the on-field thing about, offenses looking more like the 2007 Patriots as time wore on than they had beforehand. Our brains for what's normal for quarterbacks are broken by Tom Brady, right? Like Mahomes has been evaluated and compared every second of his career as a former first-round pick and then as a successful quarterback to Tom Brady. Like, that is the bar now in a way that it was not before Tom Brady. Even, the fact that you have a guy playing into his 40s with the Aaron Rodgers stuff in New York, like, there was an expectation that, Aaron Rodgers wasn't great his final year with the Packers, but sure, Tom Brady can play into his 40s and win Super Bowl, so why can't Aaron Rodgers do it? Because that's not normal, because he's the only guy in NFL history who's come close to doing that realistically. That is I think there's this sort of expectation now that not only are you going to win very often in your prime, but you're going to keep winning later into your career, into your late 30s, and even, like you said, into your 40s, because Tom Brady did it with a second team. Like, that's warped our brains, because that's not normal. That's not precedented, and it's not, frankly, realistic for anybody else. Tom Brady did that because he's the only player like Tom Brady in the history of the National Football League.
Yeah, and it's funny how, like, the first part of his career was sort of defined and broken up by that ACL tear. And yet I sort of had forgotten until then that was, like, basically the only injury he ever had in his career that kept him out of games. The only other thing was Spygate, Deflategate, which he came back and got second in MVP that year, despite having missed 4 games. And it does break my brain a little bit to think that he was 39 when they made that comeback 28-3 against the Falcons. So we used to say it on Around the NFL, you could divide his career into 3 parts, and all 3 would make the Hall of Fame. If you divide it into 2, it is a neat trick that it's almost exactly Joe Montana's stats. I forget what year it is that you pick, where it's like Joe Montana twice or 3 times if you want to have like a Kurt Warner type career. We've talked enough about Tom Brady on this podcast. Bill, I really appreciate you, and I appreciate you finishing out this series with me. We've been covering the league together this whole time, so you to me, were a perfect person to reflect on these guys, and I'm glad you agree with my top 3. Thanks, buddy.
Sounds like you're just saying I'm old, but I'll take it. I appreciate it.
No,
I'm also playing at an unprecedented level in my early 40s and hope to continue that for years to come.
I'm not gonna say you were the youngest of all of our guest hosts, but there are certainly veterans who've been in the game longer than you have that contributed. And I wanted to thank them because this is our last episode. So forgive me, Bill. But I did want to thank Brian Baldinger. I mean, he was on Fox back in the 90s.
Fellow Massapequan.
Yeah, and Kevin Harlan makes, Baldy look like a newcomer. So Kevin Harlan wanted to really thank him. Steve Wyche was covering the game before Bill Barnwell, too. And then your great friend, Mina joined us. And, of course, our friend Nate Tice, who was the ball boy back for the Vikings back in the day. I also wanted to thank him because this has been a really fun series to do, and it was a lot of work, and it took more cooperation than usual, and we're taping these shows along with our regular shows, so NFL Research really helped us out with this. Media services, our graphics and our creative team, booking, our social integration team. We don't get a chance to thank these teams often, our TOC and Ingest, and so everyone did a little extra work than we would normally have to do. We had Westwood One and the local radio call, so thank you to them for the rights to having to do that. And then more than anyone, our guys, Gavin in the back, Chris Babona, our producer, really took charge of this project and did it up right. And so thank you, Chris, all under the stewardship of our main guy, Eric Roberts. So thank you very much. NFL Daily is part of the NFL Podcast Network. It is the home for all the official NFL media podcasts produced in partnership with iHeartMedia. And yes, this has been NFL Daily's top 25 players of the last 25 years. I'm Gregg Rosenthal, and a little later this week, yes, football will be back with some regular programming. See you then.